Hi, host Eric here with host and famous person Edmund and badass debater Edmund. And we're about to run around. I'm Aff. I'm going to start right now. Edmund, are you going to time me?
Yeah, sure.
If you have a timer. I got one right here too, actually.
Okay, tell me when you're ready.
Ready whenever you are. Time starts now. Hi, my name's Eric. I'm on the affirmative side of today's resolution, and I am arguing in favor of public infrastructure over means-tested welfare programs as a means of alleviating income inequality. Criterion: whichever side best alleviates income inequality with the fewest harms and most benefits should win this round. Observation 1. Spending on means-tested social welfare programs constitutes a progressive income payout. Observation 2. We already have a steeply progressive income tax. Definition 1. Progressive tax by the Economic Times. Progressive tax is the taxing mechanism in which a higher tax is collected from the taxpayers who earn more and lower taxes from taxpayers earning less. Contention 1. Means-tested welfare programs violate justice and liberty. Subpoint A. Progressive income taxes are not just. Miller. A just system of taxation is one that is limited by a principle or rule that applies to everyone. Progressive taxation is not constrained by any such limiting principle. It applies different rules to different people depending on their degree of wealth, and it has no principled way of deciding who should be taxed and how much. By making actual income relative to one's tax rate, they violate what is probably the only universally recognized principle of economic justice, that of equal pay for equal work. None of these progressive measures can be defended on grounds of justice. Subpoint B comes to us from Wilder 2016. Government spending on welfare is also unfair. Taxpayers feel that hard-earned tax dollars should be spent to decrease rather than increase financial dependence upon government. Middle-income families with working parents are penalized by the existing system. Although only a few dollars away from welfare eligibility themselves, they help pay the bills for others. It is not uncommon for these families to spend only half as much on food as families receiving food stamps. Moreover, many of these families pay rent that costs more per unit than the housing provided to welfare recipients. Welfare benefits should encourage personal responsibility. Eligibility requirements need to include developing a realistic plan for a recipient to leave welfare. What's the best way to get recipients to leave welfare? Deny funding it entirely. Put all that funding into public infrastructure programs. It's necessarily the case if we want to be just. The way money is collected to fund welfare programs, progressive income taxes, is already unfair. And then welfare spending is doubly progressive, it's doubly unfair, it's the most unjust way we could possibly assist individuals in need. What's a better way to do it? Contention 2. Infrastructure spending creates thousands of jobs and helps the economy. Covert 2014. Investing $1.3 billion in infrastructure would add at least 29,000 jobs and $2 billion in economic growth while reducing the deficit by $200 million. That kind of spending would likely add 29,000 jobs. The jobs added are likely to be new ones, not just hiring people who are already employed. A 2012 study found 9 out of 10 of these jobs we define as middle class. So this is going to be a huge impact on income disparities judged because we're talking about people who are currently unemployed, maybe receiving welfare payments, who have no other means of making money because they are on welfare and they've created a cycle of dependency within them. This breaks that cycle by giving them a job, something useful that they can do, and actually feel like they deserve what they have in life rather than being given charity. Condition 3. If they are given charity, it only harms them. Welfare programs foster dependence on welfare benefits, which entrenches income disparities. Current research indicates that welfare, this is from Rector 2001, current research indicates that welfare dependents have significant deleterious effects on children's development, impeding their ability to become successful members of society. Dependence also reduces a child's earning in future years, reduces their earnings. This means increasing the income disparity. Being raised on welfare also increases the probability the child will drop out of school and be on welfare as an adult. Again, increasing income disparity. If you want to decrease income disparity, if you want justice, you're going to vote affirmative. We're the only side that does it.
Alright. Okay. So, time starts now. Hello, my name is Evan, and I stand in firm negation of this resolution. Framework criterion. Whichever side best alleviates income inequality should win this round. Observation 1. Reducing poverty alleviates income inequality by increasing employment rates. Contention 1. Kasperkovic 2014a. Welfare programs shown to reduce poverty in America. Social welfare programs work. More than 45 million Americans are currently living in poverty. Public programs lifted 40 million people out of poverty, including almost 9 million children. Without food stamps, unemployment benefits, the poverty rate for Americans 65 and older would jump nearly 40%. For people of all ages, the official poverty rate in the U.S. was 14.5%. Stimulus like food stamps prevent millions more people from struggling to put food on the table. Without food stamps, the poverty rate would be 17.10%, and another 8 million Americans would be living in poverty. Without tax credits like the federal earned income tax credit, poverty for children under 18 would be 22.8% instead of the official poverty rate of 19.9%. Connection 2. Bad examples of public infrastructure. Subpoint A. Stolz on 14. Tag. 3 warnings on why public infrastructure cannot be spent on. The federal government spends a lot on infrastructure already. The Federal Department of Transportation had outlays of $76 billion in 2013. Federal infrastructure spending is often on wasteful projects. Remember the $223 million Congress appropriated to fund the bridge to nowhere in Alaska? Federal infrastructure spending can be influenced on an appropriations subcommittee rather than by whether a project is a genuinely worthwhile investment. Sure, some infrastructure projects might be worthwhile. In those cases, private investors might decide to invest on their own. Subpoint B by James Backward 2016. Tag. An example of why public infrastructure the government plans to build is pointless and a waste of money. Toll roads are an inefficient, backwards approach to providing public highways. Worse, they foster corruption, political patronage, and discourage needed improvements on the rest of the highway system. Toll roads are literally a monopoly that is sanctioned and protected by the state. The state, citizens, and other highway users have no channel to influence toll road management and pricing decisions. Toll roads can't compete without the presence of congestion and motorist inconvenience on the public highway system. Connection 3. Nixon 2011. Tech. Private contractors make too much money off of government projects. Despite a widespread belief that contracting out services to the private sector saves the federal government money, a new study suggests just the opposite, that the government actually pays more when it farms out work. The study found that in 33 of 35 occupations, the government actually paid billions of dollars more to hire contractors that it would have cost government employees to perform comparable services. On average, the study found that contractors charged the federal government more than twice the amount it pays federal workers. The Heritage study found if federal employee compensation were adjusted to match that of their private sector counterparts, federal spending would be reduced by $47 billion alone. Analysis. Look, Judge, private contractors make way too much off of infrastructure projects. For example, let's say an infrastructure project was $1 million. The rich contractor was paid $1 million by the government to finish the project. She had to use $300,000 for materials, $100,000 for employees, and the contractor kept $600,000 for his or herself. The income inequality gap raised $500,000 because of the infrastructure project, since $100,000 went to the poor, the employees, and $600,000 went to the rich contractor. Connection 4. Hodge 202. Tag. Means-tested welfare programs have changed to emphasize work. Many were skeptical that welfare recipients could get and hold jobs. Some of this reduction has surely been the result of purposeful efforts to discourage eligible families from receiving benefits, but virtually everyone agrees. That's time.
All right, cool. Here we go. All right, so now we got a crossfire. Um, 3 minutes. Time starts now. When you talk about these rich contractors and their ability to exploit government contracts to get rich themselves, why don't we just use to these public projects? Why don't we just use the Army Corps of Engineers then?
Can you repeat your question?
So then, can't we just, as the app, can't we just use the Army Corps of Engineers, which is the sort of like the public contractor, right? It's like the government's own contractor. Can't we just use them to do the works projects then?
Well, are we doing that?
Well, not yet, but we're advocating for a course of action, one way or the other. You're advocating for some kind of welfare programs. I'm advocating for some kind of public works projects. Why don't we just use the Army Corps of Engineers? Would that solve your problem?
Okay, but so these Army Corps of Engineers, so are they? So they're public, right? They're not the private sector.
Correct. They're part of the Army.
Okay, so but I don't get why aren't we using them now if
Well, because in the status quo, they're using they use some public contractors for some things, but not for everything. So what that means is that um, sometimes they'll use public contractors, sometimes private. So I'm saying let's just do the public ones. That way we bypass your concerns on that warrant, right?
yeah, but this relates to my subpoint B in contention 2, which is why an example of why public infrastructure the government plans to build is pointless and a waste of money. It's called toll roads. Toll roads. And whenever the government, the part of, I guess, your so-called army, the government will plan to make it into a toll road. So then that fosters corruption. And by giving these public engineers, I guess, to build these infrastructure projects, you're giving the government a chance to steal money from other people unequally. Yeah, you're just giving them a chance to steal money from the
Okay,
rich.
but listen. So then, basically, if we use public engineers, then we bypass your concerns in that last contention. We're still subject to the concerns for the toll roads you mentioned. Or toll? Okay, look, Edmund, that's not the answer you need to get to something like that. First of all, your answer should be, so are you saying we have to make poor people join the Army?
Oh.
That's your first answer. We don't have public engineers that aren't military, okay? For the federal government. The federal government has no non-military public engineers, contractors, for doing stuff like that, for doing construction work, infrastructure work. There's no federal construction team, right? If there is, but it's called the Army Corps of Engineers and it's military. So that's not going to work because that's not giving people jobs. That's compelling. That's saying if you want a job, you have to enlist in the military. They can already do that. That doesn't have any solvency, right? Can't poor people already enlist in the military? Yes, they can. Now, look, that's a good answer to the jobs thing, too. If these poor people really wanted jobs, why don't they enlist in the military? It's a good question to ask and cross. It's not gonna. You don't necessarily have to follow it up with anything, but it does sort of sweep the legs out from underneath the jobs argument a little bit if they let it. You know, if your opponent lets it. I mean, the answer to that is because you shouldn't have to become an indentured servant, which is basically what a soldier is, for a certain period of time in order to get a job. I mean, do you think your answer should be like, well, do you think it would be okay if you have to join the military to get a job? You know. But anyway, the point is, don't let them try to get it, squirrel out of it. The other answer to it, Edmund, is this resolution specifies public infrastructure projects. It doesn't specify who's doing them. So we're better off assuming they will be done as they're done in the status quo with private contractors than we are assuming some new way of doing it is going to happen. They have to defend how public infrastructure projects are executed in the status quo, how they've been executed for the last multiple decades in this country. They can't have make-believe time where they make up this magical kind of public infrastructure that has all benefits and no harms and say, see, we win. Don't let them do that. You know what I'm saying? Alright, so let's go on to the next thing. Do you want to redo the cross so we can get a little bit more stuff talked about? Because we only talked about one thing. Or do you want to move forward?
Yeah, I'm just gonna move forward.
Alright, then fine. So it's my rebuttal?
Yeah.
Okay. When you were doing your speech, I was getting more soda. Can you tell me the flow? What do you have? Which case did you run?
It's Edmund's neck case V2, except I didn't get the whole contention 4.
Okay.
So, just count contention 3, that's all.
Alright, fine. Here we go. Okay, so alright. Tiempo begins now. Okay, first let's talk about my opponent's criterion. I'm fine with that criterion because unfortunately for him, the welfare side of this resolution is unable to have any impact positively on income inequality, unlike the affirmative side of the resolution. It's observation 1. Reducing poverty alleviates income inequality by increasing employment rates is absurd, ridiculous, and nonsense. I absolutely reject it. He provides no warrant for it. It's an observation, so I can just simply reject it since he has no explanation for it. There's no reason to assume that reducing poverty increases employment rates. All right, his first contention, Kaspervik, says welfare programs shown to reduce poverty in America. He talks about public programs lifted 40 million people out of poverty, including almost 9 million. But that is by this whole methodology of this card is by comparing the wealth of people with the free money versus wealth of people without the free money. And of course, people with wealth with free money versus without is going to be higher. But what they're not considering is the actual negative impacts of welfare that have caused people to remain in poverty, that have caused people to need that extra money in the first place. If the government were stealing all that money from taxpayers in the first place, there wouldn't be nearly as much poverty as there is. If the poor people, the so-called poor people, were left alone and stopped harassing by wasting their time filling out government forms trying to apply for this program and that, they'd be out doing something productive with their time and making money. Now let's go on to I want to read a card on that actually, which is specifically what he's not factoring in the actual negative harms to the individual human being, the psychological harms that are necessarily experienced when we allow somebody to accept welfare. We give somebody welfare. We're telling them you are helpless. You are an infant child. You can't take care of yourself. You need our help. And then we teach them to do that. We cause them to have a external locus of control, and as a consequence, that is going to hurt them and make them worse, not better. It's going to make income inequality worse, not better, because, god damn it, I'm having a hard time finding this card. Because, 1, welfare disincentivizes work. So we know from Springer that in Seattle, when they tried to pass a living wage law, that in fact they had the opposite impact, that welfare caused the people to work less because they wanted to keep their benefits and still receive the added benefits of a living wage, thus getting the same amount of money while working less. That is not the intended impact. If we want to actually improve income inequality, a living wage makes sense. It's not possible within the context of welfare. Next, there's a myth that government assistance is extremely effective at helping people get out of and stay out of poverty, but that is in fact a myth. Johnson F. explains. The real question is, should we be asking, where would we be without these programs? If Social Security, every year, Census Bureau data provides that welfare programs are instrumental in getting people back on their feet quickly. That is exactly why these programs are necessary, precisely by cutting their funding doesn't make any sense. What? This doesn't say what it says it's going to say. Oh, god damn it. Never mind. Forget that card. The wrong card. Alright, well, let me go on to. Yeah. This is the worst rebuttal in the history of mankind. Well, you have to have shit printed out, you know? Alright, well, I'm out of time. I can't find your case anymore, and I can't even reference it, so I'm screwed. Alright, my bad. Did the best I could given my failure to be prepared.
I'll take like 30 seconds back.
Okay. Talk with famous people audience, you're about to watch me get my ass whooped. I just tanked that rebuttal. Edmund's gonna kill me. Look at him rubbing his hands in glee.
Okay, time.
Alright. Rock and roll. The INTP apparently is determined to give the ENTPs a complex. Alright, let's see. I don't know. We'll see how determined he is right now.
So time starts now. Okay, first I would like to address framework. We have the same framework, at least enough, similar enough, because we're both saying we should alleviate income inequality, so we can move on from there. Now on to their contention one. Their contention one is about how social welfare programs violate justice and liberty. So I have 2 warns against this card. Number one, how impactful is taking money from the rich, the really rich, and just giving it to the poor, and that keeps 45 million of them alive and not starving to death. How impactful is that to the rich anyways? And also, my second one is I would like to point out this goes against for subpoint B. I would like to point out that public infrastructure, a lot of it is roads. Well, rich people have the money to buy cars, and they use the roads more than poor people. So the rich is actually using. So public infrastructure is also, by their standard, unfair because they're only allowing the rich people use it. Well, the rich people can only use what public infrastructure provides. Now, on to their contention two. Their contention two is about how infrastructure creates jobs and benefits the economy. I would like to read this card called Rugged 2008 tag. Public infrastructure fails to create jobs. According to economic research, it can be counterproductive if it is not timely, targeted, and temporary. By nature, infrastructure spending is not timely and very hard to target. Even when money is available, it can be months or even years before it's spending. It's spended. Government-funded infrastructure projects are not good investments either, and tend to suffer from massive cost overruns, waste, fraud, and abuse. So this is my first one against this card. My second one is that, again, the infrastructure projects are only temporary. So we're saying those for this month for one infrastructure project, and a person in poverty attended it and worked and got the income for that month. But then what's he gonna do for the next 11 months of the year? He had nothing. The person has nothing to do and can't live, which is why they need welfare. And finally, to their contention three, which is about how welfare causes dependence on welfare benefits, I would like to read a card called Hot to M2 tag. Means tested welfare programs have changed to emphasize work. Many were skeptical that welfare recipients could get and hold jobs. Some of this reduction has surely been the result of purposeful effects to discourage eligible families from receiving benefits, but virtually everybody agrees that there has have been far-reaching changes in the way states implement and run programs. These changes share a common feature: they emphasize work, and a large portion of the families who are no longer receiving welfare benefits are working. Look, Judge, welfare programs are now changing to encourage employment. So there will be no welfare dependence anymore because they're encouraging employment, and that benefits income inequality more than it already is benefiting income inequality. Thank you, and please vote for the negative side of this resolution.
How much time? How much time do you have left?
I had like 30 seconds.
All right, you should start going over my rebuttal then in the last 30 seconds. Start saying like whatever you see is weakest. Let me get this out of the way right now. Go.
Okay.
I would attack. I answered your first thing with. I don't remember what I said. Where?
Before that, you just brought up like disincentivizes work and welfare dependence.
All right, so that's what I did. Okay, fine. All right. Well, fine. So let's do the cross then.
Okay. Okay, so time starts now. Okay, so I would like to ask you, what did you exactly say against my contingent one?
Well, read it. What was your contingent one again?
My contingent one was Kasperkovic, which is
Okay, right. I said that there's a problem with the methodology there, which is that it's comparing against um, the same exact world except without the money from welfare. But it's not factoring in the fact that the giving of the welfare money itself causes harms that wouldn't be in place except for the giving of the welfare. So it's not factoring in those harms.
Okay. So you're saying, okay.
Basically, it's like saying, look, if we shoot people full of heroin, they're way happier than they were before we shot them full of heroin. Okay, but you're not considering the fact that you're making them heroin addicts.
Okay.
Right? Yes, you're improving their happiness right now, because if you're shot full of a highly addictive drug like heroin, you're going to be happy because that's what drugs do, right? They make you happy. But doesn't mean it's a good idea to do drugs, right?
So you're only relying on your harms of welfare to make your want?
No, I already told you about all the millions of jobs that public infrastructure creates, and how that will.
Against this one, against my argument, you're only relying on the harms of welfare?
No, I indicated that the methodology is not sound because it's not factoring in tons and tons of different variables, including not just the impact of welfare upon the people receiving it, but the impact of taking the money in the first place, stealing the money by the progressive tax rate on the economy. That harms the economy dramatically and brings everybody down. So it's not a fair assessment.
Okay. So, and also, so for framework, do you agree with that we have similar frameworks that we can just move on?
Is your framework about let's measure it according to income inequality?
Yeah.
Okay, then fine. Yeah, if that's what we're measuring, then fine, sure. All right, I have a question for you. You said that roads are used more by the rich. Don't poor people ride on the bus?
Well, yes, but
Are you saying that poor people don't go places?
they do go places, but that's only one bus, and and
There's
in
more than one
December,
bus.
well, okay, but there's more cars than buses.
In Los Angeles, maybe, but not everywhere is Los Angeles. The point is, I think it's fair to say that infrastructure is something everybody uses. So because poor people use parks more, can we say that? Then the poor people use parks more because they have no other expensive entertainment place to go, and so therefore it's not fair to have parks.
Oh, that's time.
Okay. Yeah, that was a silly answer, Edmund. Rich people use the roads more. I like it. It's clever, but it's silly. You should say instead that there's no, there's absolutely no reason to think that the government has an obligation to spend money equally so that everybody benefits equally from the money it spends. As a matter of fact, what it needs to do is spend money such that um, the nation benefits as a whole, and that may take a variety of different forms. Like sometimes we have to spend money on foreign aid. Americans get none of that money. Doesn't mean we should never spend money on foreign aid.
Okay.
Okay? Alright, so what are we on now? Summary?
Summary.
Is it my summary?
Yeah.
Alright, 2 minutes. I'm going to do well in the summary now. Time starts now. My opponent is probably under the mistaken impression that I dropped several of his arguments. I did not. In fact, my responses are responsive to all of his warrants entirely because you have two key factors. One, welfare payments cause an entrenchment of social inequalities, of welfare, of wealth inequalities, of income disparities. So we know that that's entrenched by welfare. It can't possibly solve that which it makes worse. It doesn't make any sense. So he's going to lose because of that. The second reason he's going to lose is because I have successfully established that public infrastructure does create jobs, and they're middle class jobs, and there are jobs given to unemployed people. Now, I read a specific card that indicates all of those specific warrants. He read a general response that says, in general, public infrastructure fails to create jobs because of cost overruns, waste, abuse, and temporary nature of the work provided. None of those things are a reason to fail to create jobs. All those things are disadvantages. He doesn't actually respond to the warrant. His answer is not responsive, therefore it stands. Therefore, public infrastructure does create jobs. He's never challenged the fact that jobs minimize the amount of difference between the incomes of the rich and the poor, which I've established earlier in my case, and extend now. So now that I've established clearly that, in fact, income inequality is solved by better employment, and I've established clearly and definitively, without any response from him, that in fact, public infrastructure does create jobs. Therefore, we can logically conclude that public infrastructure projects will minimize the income disparity. However, in contrast, I've shown in no uncertain terms that my opponent will receive a disincentive to work. Now, he's answered that by saying new welfare programs are emphasizing work. That does not account for my warrant. My warrant is if we want to actually increase the amount of money people earn, we need to increase the living wage, and that's impossible with welfare going on concurrently because the unique interaction between those two vectors. He's not accounted for that. He's not responded to it. It still stands. That means welfare programs do cause a disincentive to work in an environment where we're trying to raise a living wage. And lastly, he talks about there being no impact on justice as the people who are the victims of crimes. That was a good summary speech, even though I didn't really cover everything, but I more or less did.
Okay, I'll use 30 seconds for it. Time starts now. Okay, time's up.
All right.
Okay, so 2 minutes. Time starts. Okay, so time starts now. Okay, so first I would like to address contention 1. So their rebuttal to contention 1, which is the only one they actually rebutted to, is how the methodology on this card is wrong, and it doesn't account for the negative harms of welfare, which is disincentivizing work and welfare dependence, which is bad since it includes many harms. Well, I've read a card called HOT. It says that welfare programs do encourage employment, and this lifts the living wage, as they said it doesn't. It does lift the living wage because first the recipients of welfare, they have no wage, and then now they have no employment, and now they at least get a job and can work for their own income and live by independently. And also now I would like to read Winery, which Winery basically says that it says this. Diseases lead to poverty because of unaffordable medicine. People face challenges due to diseases. For instance, someone who gets sick may have to sell their possessions to pay for medicine. Parents not expecting their children to survive have more children and spend less on education. This basically says that the recipients of welfare, a lot of them actually have diseases and they need welfare because, well, they can't work by themselves anyways. And now I would like to impact my other contentions. My contention two, which is about bad examples of public infrastructure and why it cannot be spent on, goes against their contention two, which is about why infrastructure creates jobs and increases the economy, which we've refuted. And this completely destroys public infrastructure because it basically proves why it cannot be spent on, and they haven't rebutted it. So therefore, we cannot use infrastructure. It doesn't alleviate income inequality, and we prove 45 million people are benefited, and that's alleviating income inequality more than that many ways.
Okay. Okay. Grand Cross. 3 minutes. Tiempo.
Okay, time starts now. Can you say what was your answer to my rebuttal against your contention one, which is about how social welfare programs violate justice and liberty?
Oh, I said that you indicate that it doesn't really hurt, so it doesn't matter that it's unjust. And I said that's up for the victim of the crime to decide. It's not for you to decide for the victim of the crime how seriously they should feel bad about being victimized.
Oh, I said it was not too impactful to the rich.
Right, but they've been victimized by a crime, right? The injustice is a crime. It's a crime against their natural property rights. So it's not up to you to decide how badly they feel about that. It could be hugely impactful to them. Just because they're rich doesn't mean they're not tight on money. They may have a lot of economic commitments.
Okay.
I have a question for you. Now you talk about diseased people needing welfare, right?
Yeah.
But don't they already get welfare? Isn't that your point?
People?
Yeah. So why do we need to give them more welfare?
Well, I'm saying that we need welfare because they need welfare because they have diseases and can't work by themselves.
Right, but in this resolution, aren't we supposed to be arguing about a hypothetical pile of money and we're trying to figure out which one to spend it on? It doesn't necessarily mean that just because we're going to spend this money on infrastructure doesn't mean we're going to pull money away from existing welfare programs.
Well, we're saying which one should be prioritized more.
Okay. Well, so you're saying we should prioritize continuing to pay disabled people over building new roads?
Yes.
You can't make that comparison because continuing an existing project is not the same thing as paying for a new project. They're not comparable. They have to either both be, like you say, we'd rather continue paying poor people than continue maintaining the roads. That would be a fair argument. Or we'd rather start a new welfare program or start a new roads program. That would be fair. But you can't have it, I have to meet one burden and you meet the other one, can you? Which one do you want? You want them to both be new projects or neither?
Oh, okay. So, well, basically, I just
Yeah, don't push there. Don't push there, Edmund. Okay, don't push on that ground. Don't because you don't want to have to answer that question, and they don't want to have to answer it either. Neither of you want to define that. All right. So
Okay.
just don't go there. But if you were to go there, you want to say new program because if it's existing, then you have to say the government should stop maintaining the roads so they can continue giving people free money.
But not make it sound as bad.
Well, I mean, it's hard to defend the idea that the government should stop maintaining the roads. I mean, after a certain while, we'd no longer be able to drive anywhere, right?
Okay.
After like 5 years, there'd be like one road that was still left functional you could drive on.
So, but then, okay, so the resolution basically says that, so it's just saying that you have to prioritize the other one over the other. So
Well,
there's
see,
still
it's
going
ambiguous, but the point is, I think that you need to argue. Well, first of all, like I said, you want to avoid that ground. You don't want to have to define whether it's a new project or not. But we are presuming that there's some decision to be made, right? And there's nothing in the resolution to suggest that the decision is, should we eliminate something? So my take on it is, we're sort of asked to assume there's a hypothetical pile of money that's going to be spent on one of these two things and decide which one we should spend it on. Okay? I think it's probably the best way to interpret it. Let's go on to the last speeches. It's my final focus speech, right?
Yeah.
All right, 2 minutes. Time starts now. My opponent simply ignored my argument about the job creation. This is going to be the key warrant here. He said that they've already refuted it. They've already refuted job creation. But my point is that their reputations didn't respond to my warrant. They say in their refutation, I counted 4 distinct warrants. That there were cost overruns. That there is waste. That there is abuse. And that jobs created are only temporary. I did not hear anything in that card that said jobs are not actually created. So, as a consequence, he's not responsive to the job creation, therefore I win that point. Now, having won the job creation point, we know then that I've won this round, because there's no way he can possibly win the round given the fact that I have additionally shown that welfare causes a disincentive to work via the living wage argument. He's positioned the living wage as simply earning more money, earning as much to a living wage. But when I talk about the living wage, what I'm referring to is legislation that increases the minimum wage to $15 or $20 an hour, depending on where you define it as. And I referenced the Springer card. And the Springer card talks about Seattle. And Seattle is a place where they passed a living wage law. And the reason it didn't work is because welfare payments to citizen residents of the community compelled them to make the wise but undesirable economic choice to cut back on the amount of hours they worked so they could keep their free stuff and still take advantage of the higher wages. So as you see, Judge, we've won on both key vectors in the round, therefore you have to vote F. Thanks. Okay.
Okay. So time starts now. Okay, Judge. So first, I would like to point out on my side of the flow, my contention one. So I responded to their rebuttals, which is negative effects of welfare, disincentivizes work, and welfare dependence is bad, with winery and HOTS. Winery basically tells us that people have to get welfare because they're disabled and cannot work by themselves, and they have to get welfare or else they'll die. And they have not responded to that, so therefore my contention one stands. And also I also pointed out with HOTS that welfare is now encouraging employment, which means that there's no welfare dependence now, and also it does not disincentivize work. So my contention one still stands, and that's 45 million people positively impacted. Their income is positively impacted, and also we're helping 45 million people not die. And that's just to me, and it should be just to you, regardless of framework preference. And also, This alleviates income inequality more than anything they have, like their contention 2, infrastructure creates 29,000 jobs. That's not a lot at all, and boosts the economy. Well, we alleviate income inequality more than them, we should win the round automatically. But also, I would like to go to my contention 2, which basically says why we cannot use public infrastructure because of bad examples, and how, well, if we spend on public infrastructure, it's going to be on bad examples and going to be wasteful and wasteless and and not and bad and should not be spent on. That's all. So, and I've provided even examples: the $223 million bridge to nowhere, and also toll roads, where the government can just steal money from rich people by collecting with toll roads, and that is unjust. Okay.
Okay. I think you probably took the round. Hold on. Okay, I got policy. I got policy coming in here pretty soon, by the way, just to let you know. But yeah, I think you probably took the round in the final focus. Although I thought I probably had it coming out of my final focus. But here's some things. First of all, a good flow judge would have noted this as well. You never answered Springer, and you had such an easy answer to give. Okay, you never answered Springer. You just said, "Oh, well, I show you that it encourages employment, and therefore it does not disincentivize." But I had addressed that by saying, "Look, that's not responsive because I'm saying we need to pass this specific legislation called the living wage law, and that in that context only, that it disincentivizes work." And I made the claim that a living wage law is a good idea, right? So you can attack this in multiple ways that are effective. But most importantly, the first thing you should have noticed and attacked it on, I never read that card. I never read Springer. I just referred to it. I said what Springer said, and I said, this is from a card, Springer, but I never read the card. So I shouldn't be getting impacts from it like that. You just say, he never even read the goddamn card. He just talked about it. That's not going to cut it, Judge. He needs to read the card. Even if he had read the card, he's only talking about impacts in cities where they pass a living wage law, which is a vast minority of cities. It's only not that many cities, a few big cities maybe. The whole rest of the country doesn't have that, so he has no impacts from that for 99% of the country. Additionally, his point about it disincentivizing work is well, I think what you say is that, oh, the last thing you say is, and he never established that a living wage law is actually a good thing. He just assumes that we all agree that a living wage law is a good thing. He never even told us what it was. He just said, well, we need to have a living wage law instead. So this disincentivizes work in the context of a living wage law. So therefore, it disincentivizes work, and it's bad. Well, he needs to, one, acknowledge the fact that that's only in a couple of cities, not everywhere in the country. Two, he needs to, if he wants to make that claim, establish why living wage law is preferable to some other approach to this thing, which he hasn't done at all. Three, he needs to read the goddamn card. And four, I mean, you should like rip that to pieces, right? Because what I just did there was so cheaty. You know, it's like super cheaty. Okay? So don't let me get away with that shit. Got any questions or anything before we're done?
No.
Okay. Good round, Evan. I think you probably took it. we'll see if anybody gives us any feedback and who they think won. I don't know. All right, thanks for watching Talk with Famous People. Thank you, Edwin, for being a guest.